RedFM.
Miceal O'Hurley, he is a defence and security expert, editor of Diplomacy magazine in Ireland, and his wife actually is Ukrainian, joins me by phone. Miceal, good morning.
Good morning.
It's amazing to watch Flight Radar 24. I don't know if you've had a look at that this morning. You probably have. There isn't a single plane in Ukrainian airspace. They're all around Moldova, Lithuania, Belarus, and the Russian border, but nothing flying in Ukrainian airspace. It's astonishing to watch.
Well, certainly no civilian aircraft wants to be in the air. The Russians have a history. They shot down MH17, a civilian airliner, in 2014, so everybody's being prudent. However, it creates a humanitarian crisis because 47 million people are now trapped inside of Ukraine with Russian artillery falling on their heads with nowhere to go.
And loss of life already, as we know.
Well, Ukraine lost 14,000 people in the invasion in 2014, experienced 1.5 million internally displaced people, and over 100,000 casualties. We can only expect, given the breadth of the Russian assault that occurred overnight, that those numbers will pair in comparison to what we will see in the coming days.
Really? Are you really serious about that?
I think it's time for everybody to be reasonable and understand that Putin has assembled the largest military force since World War II. He has unleashed it. He's at the top of his power game. He knows that Europe's going to quit buying all of his energy resources, dirty coal, oil, and gas, because of our carbon emission goals. And now is the time for him to strike. Why? Okay, so we'd stop using their gas and we stop using their oil and stuff. Why does he need a land grab? You only need to read his autobiography and the essay he wrote last summer, in which he blames the West for the fall of the Soviet Empire. He took it as a personal affront, and he has made it his stated goal to reassemble a greater Russia, which includes reassembling what had been the Soviet Union. Just as Hitler did in Mein Kampf, he told us what he was going to do. We've been fools to think it was ever about NATO. It's always been about reassembling the Soviet Union. And he's at the top of his power game, and now he's using it.
And how is NATO and the West supposed to respond to this? I'm hearing of 100 jets on high alert now. It should be military jets on high alert. These are NATO jets. Is this going to stop at economic sanctions or a military response?
I think only time will tell. We have to remember that NATO works by consensus. Hungary has already said that they have sided with Russia and betrayed their promises to NATO and mutual security in Europe. NATO might do something as they did in Bosnia-Herzegovina when they intervened to save the lives of civilians, Muslims who were being murdered in a genocide. But even then, it might well escalate the situation.
So, our concerns really as a country in Ireland should be on a humanitarian level, should it, or more?
Absolutely. Right now, we have not made any real provisions to help with a humanitarian crisis of this size. Again, expected to be the largest since World War II.
No, it's just been announced that any Ukrainian can come here. No visa required.
I'm not saying that, but we can make a concerted effort to be helpful. We can expect thousands and thousands of people to cross the Polish frontier anytime soon. We need to put pressure on Hungary to keep its border open. Civilians will be hungry. It's 4 degrees below zero right now in Kyiv. They will be wet, cold, hungry, and afraid.
Yes.
And we need to be prepared to help them. That's our humanitarian undertaking, and our neutrality is not challenged by being humanitarian.
Yes, we are already seeing signs of that with panic buying at supermarkets, lots of queuing, not just at fuel stations, but also at supermarkets. ATMs have run out of cash. There are explosions in all major cities and towns.
My sister-in-law was woken up this morning with her building shaken and artillery falling around their heads. She's 20 years old, and instead of having fun and studying at university, she now has a backpack on, fleeing for her life. That is what Russia has done, because Ukraine was a functioning democracy on the border of a despot country, and Putin couldn't stand that. It's not about the U.S. It's not about anything other than Putin wanting to realize his goal of reassembling a Russian empire.
But are there Russians within Ukraine territory that want to be back part of Russia again?
There are Irish people inside of Ireland who want a united Ireland. There are people who don't want a united Ireland. They are a gross minority, and there's a misunderstanding. If you go to the Donbass, Luhansk and Donetsk, the supposed Russian regions, you will find that most of those people do not want to be under Russian control.
Okay.
Since 2014, their lives have gotten measurably worse. Don't buy into the propaganda. Ask the people who know.
And tell me this, were people caught by surprise there, the likes of your wife's sister and everybody else? They just didn't expect this to happen, is it?
Neil, everybody has been sleeping with their bathtubs filled at night because they know that Russia has a penchant for disturbing critical infrastructure like water and electricity. Yeah. They've been buying batteries. They've had backpacks. No one in Ukraine is surprised. Here's where we need to be concerned in Ireland. During the pandemic, Ukraine was the breadbasket for all of Europe. And we are going to experience food shortages in Ireland and everything else because of the Russian invasion. We will not go unscathed because of Russia's illegal conduct.
Is your wife very upset?
Of course she's upset. I mean, I have to tell you, I'm a grown man. I spent 2.5 years at war. I was decorated for heroism in combat. I spent hours crying. But when I finished, I was determined to do whatever I could to help Ukraine.
What can you do?
It's that simple. What can I do?
Conversations like this help.
Packages together. We can urge Dáil Éireann to pass a resolution making clear where Ireland stands. We can put out good information as opposed to Russian propaganda, because the internet is being flooded already with this view that Russians were being persecuted. I guarantee you that's not the case.
But the only response from NATO to date, right up until a few minutes ago, is calling on Russia to immediately withdraw. Like, is that, I mean, that's weak, isn't it?
Well, what can we do? When you're being threatened by a criminal gang in your neighborhood, you can't just become a vigilante and attack them. You must call them to abide by the law.
Okay. Yeah.
The fact that NATO was reasonable, calm, rational, and wanted to give every effort for diplomacy to work should not be held against them.
For now.
There's a lot of talk from your callers that NATO and the U.S. has wanted this attack. I think a review of the last few days will show that that's just not true.
Okay.
Russia is even saying that Poland is sending troops in to conduct sabotage.
Yeah, but that's the kind of fake news in an online world, you know.
But unfortunately, people buy into it.
Yeah.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater and call yourself innocent.
Yeah.
People need to get real. Stop this animosity of the U.S. It's about Ukraine and its existence and the fact that they wanted to be part of Europe. And let me just say,
so it's not about America being in Ukraine on Russia's back door and him getting very nervous about it.
Oh, listen, NATO is closer in Poland. They share a border with Russia in Alaska. There are bigger threats. It's never been about NATO. It's about a functioning democracy.
But it has been about NATO. It has been about NATO, because I've heard over and over again that Ukraine was about to join NATO, and Putin was saying, over my dead body, would NATO be even closer to Russia than it already is?
Listen, Ukraine wasn't close at all. Let's be clear about the facts. In 2010, Ukraine declared in the Constitution and by Parliamentary Act that it was a neutral, unaligned nation. Neutral. It wasn't until Russia invaded in 2014 that Ukraine asked to be a member of NATO.
Yeah, so you're agreeing with what I'm saying.
Created this situation.
Yeah.
Well, listen, it's like blaming a homeowner for putting an alarm in their house after they've been ransacked.
No, but it's how Putin would react to that news, you see.
Well, it's how criminals react when you put good bolts on the door. Putin invaded Ukraine, and only then did Ukraine want to be part of NATO. Let's just be very clear about that. It was a neutral nation by constitution and by law. Can we really complain that he felt threatened by the fact that after invading and killing their people, they wanted the protection of their neighbors?
Yeah, I can't blame them for that when you put it like that. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Oh, and let's just be clear. He said the other night that it was Lenin and the Bolsheviks that created Ukraine. Ukraine had diplomatic relations with the Byzantine Empire 1,500 years ago.
Does anybody in Russia want Putin taken out of the picture?
A lot do, but where are they? They're poisoned, imprisoned. Even former generals have said that this is madness.
So he's taken them all out. He's taken out all threats in advance.
Last summer's brutal repression of all civic uprisings in Russia, his dismembering of non-governmental organizations like Memorial, which sought to bring light to Soviet Empire misdeeds, murders, and killings. He got rid of all of it in advance of this.
Okay.
He repatriated $5 billion to Russia in December so that he could fund this invasion.
Okay.
He had his mind made up months and months and months ago, if not years ago. The resort to diplomacy has been a false flag, and NATO has not been the issue. It's been about the willingness of former Soviet republics to shirk off the colonial past and be free and independent members of Europe as they once were.
And he doesn't like it. Thank you for that powerful insight, Miceal. Thank you so much. Pleasure talking to you.
All right.
Got some other calls standing by.